I am Evelyn. I'm 42 years old, a mother, a wife, and someone who never thought she'd lose herself in such a quiet, devastating way. How did a simple beach day with my son turn into a choice I can't take back? How does loneliness twist into something you barely recognize until it's too late? If you ever felt invisible, if you ever wondered how a heart can break without a sound, stay with me, listen to my story. And tell me, have you ever faced emotional boundaries you weren't prepared for? Share your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear your perspective. 2 years have passed since the day everything in my life began to change. I am Evelyn, 42 years old, a wife, a mother, and gradually a woman who had forgotten herself. My marriage to David, my husband, was once the simple dream I cherished. After more than 15 years together, we built a peaceful home and raised two wonderful children. Lucas, 16 years old, and Ella, our little daughter, whose laughter used to fill the house. From the outside, people would say I had it all, but there are voids that cannot be measured by the eyes of others. David became increasingly busy with work, late meetings, long business trips, hurried apologies. At first, I convinced myself that he was doing it all for the family, but as the years passed, those reassurances no longer soothed the emptiness growing inside me. Dinners were often missing David. When he was there, he merely skimmed through the meals with perfunctory questions. Have you finished your homework? I have an early flight tomorrow. Cracks me up because I became a silent shadow, holding together a family that barely noticed I was there. Many nights, I sat alone in the dark living room listening to the ticking of the clock, asking myself, does he even truly see me anymore? Sometimes, I watched David sleep beside me, the dim light from the bedside lamp highlighting the fine lines around his eyes. He had changed, and maybe so had I. Neither of us reached out to touch, to listen, or even to look at each other the way we once did. I gradually learned to endure. I kept my smile as I took Ella to school. I tended to the house out of habit. I still talked to Lucas on the days he was willing to open up. But inside, little pieces of me were quietly shattering. I once believed I was strong enough to live with that neglect. Until one morning when David hurriedly packed his luggage and left behind the familiar words. I'm sorry, Evelyn, I have to leave on a sudden business trip. And, as always, I just silently nodded, swallowing the bitterness rising in my throat. That day, I decided to take Lucas on a trip to the beach, a plan that was originally meant for the whole family, but now was just the two of us. I thought I also the sea breeze and the sunlight would help me forget the emptiness, but I was wrong. It was right there on the white sands under the blazing sun that I began to confront the deep cracks inside myself, cracks I had pretended not to see for so many years. That morning, the sky was strangely clear. The small suitcase was neatly packed in the car trunk, and Ella chirped her goodbyes to me and her brother before heading off to stay at Grandma's house. Only Lucas and I remained. A beach trip I had once hoped would be a chance to bring the family closer. But David was busy, as always. We're still going, right, Mom? Lucas asked, his eyes a mix of anticipation and hesitation. I smiled, masking the sting rising in my chest. Of course we are, sweetheart, I said, gently patting Lucas on the shoulder. Throughout the drive to the beach, Lucas sat beside me, wearing his headphones and staring out the window. His face showed traces of maturity I hadn't noticed before. Over the past years, I had been so consumed with worrying about David, so busy enduring the growing emptiness, that I had forgotten how quickly my little boy had grown. There was a slight awkwardness, a trace of unfamiliarity lingering between us, as if both of us were cautiously trying to rediscover the old rhythm of mother and son. I glanced at Lucas, a wave of tenderness swelling in my chest. My son, he's grown so tall already. Part of me wanted to break the silence, to ask him hundreds of questions about school, about friends, about all the things he was holding in his growing heart. But the words caught in my throat. When we arrived at the beach, golden sunlight stretched out like a shimmering carpet across the sand. The salty breeze caressed my cheeks, whispering, "Let go. Forget the sadness." Lucas quickly set up the small beach umbrella and spread the towels on the sand. I smiled at him, my heart filling with a bittersweet mixture of love and regret. Maybe, just for today, I would allow myself to forget everything. I laid back on the towel, closed my eyes, and let the warm sunlight wash over my weary body. A voice inside me whispered, "Enjoy it, Evelyn, just this once." Lucas sat down beside me, playing with the sand, occasionally stealing glances at me. The distance between us at that moment was so small and yet somehow still vast. I had thought this trip was simply an escape from David's coldness, loading type of thought. But I didn't know then that here, under the radiant sun and the soothing sound of the waves, a fragile boundary between loneliness and silent yearning would begin to blur. The afternoon sunlight softened, painting the sandy beach a honey gold hue. I gently turned on the long towel, feeling the salty sea breeze caressing my skin. "Lucas, can you help me apply sunscreen?" I spoke gently, without a second thought, simply because my back was starting to burn, and in this vast beach, there were only the two of us. Lucas, the 16-year-old son with deep brown eyes and naturally tousled hair, hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, Mom," he replied softly. I lay face down, pulling my hair to one side, exposing my bare back to the soft sunlight. Lucas took the cream, his clumsy fingers applying thin layers onto my shoulders. His first move was slow and cautious, so much so that I couldn't help but chuckle softly. "You can be a bit tougher," I reassured, still keeping my tone gentle. Lucas smiled awkwardly, then followed. His hand was warm, slightly trembling, but also very careful. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to relax, enjoying that innocent care. And then Lucas hesitated awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable, unsure how to apply the sunscreen. Lucas awkwardly spread sunscreen on my shoulders, carefully avoiding going too low, respectful of boundaries. I froze for a moment. A part of me screamed, "Stop it, Evelyn." But another part, the weak part that I had hidden for so many lonely years, craved that tenderness to the point of desperation. Lucas stopped, as if waiting for a reaction. I opened my eyes, locking gazes with him. Those eyes were no longer the gaze of a small boy needing protection. They are the eyes of a boy inquiring, yearning to be trusted. Because I didn't say anything. I also didn't get up, just lying there in silence, letting that moment hang between the two of them. Fragile, dangerous, and nameless. The sea breeze still blows, the waves still crash against the shore regularly, but inside me, a small crack has split wide open. And he and Evelyn, the 42-year-old wife of a perpetually absent man, have realized that I am standing on the fragile boundary between emotional need and familial responsibility. And from here, I know everything will never be the same again. That evening, the atmosphere in the house was suffocatingly quiet. Lucas had gone to his room early while I wandered between the living room and the kitchen, not knowing what to do except continuously wash my hands and clean. I kept thinking about Lucas's careful gestures, his awkward kindness reminding me how distant we'd become. Every time I close my eyes, I can clearly feel his palm gliding over my skin like an indelible mark. I blame myself. I told myself it was just an accident, a fleeting moment of loneliness and exhaustion. But deep down, I know I didn't stop it. When the clock was nearing midnight, I sat on the sofa, the dim yellow light casting a gentle glow on the silent walls. I was contemplating what to do when the sound of stealthy footsteps echoed from the stairs. Lucas, in a loose t-shirt and sports pants, appeared at the doorstep. The dim light made his face half bright, half dark, further highlighting the mix of confusion and determination. "Ma, you're not asleep yet," Lucas asked, whispering. I was startled. "No, Mom, I can't sleep." He hesitated to come closer, then sat down just a short distance from me. No one said another word. Only the sound of the clock ticking steadily and the gentle breath of spring night mist outside the window remained. Pegasus is looking at me. The gaze is no longer carefree as before. The That is a searching gaze, something greater, more complex. I turned my face away, my palm clenched tightly. You should go to sleep, Lucas. You should go to sleep, Lucas. I tried to keep my voice calm. But instead of getting up, he whispered, Mom knows today something is different, right? I closed my eyes tightly. Don't ask. Don't make Mom say it. But he persisted, each word careful, yet full of determination. I don't want you to feel alone anymore. Opened my eyes and caught that gaze, a gaze that made my heart tighten with fear and an intense emotional vulnerability that I had never admitted to myself. Lucas quietly reassured me, sitting nearby in a small gesture, but enough to make all my reason waver. Oh, my. Late in week, we looked at each other for a moment longer, then I stood up abruptly, almost running towards the stairs. Good night, my child, I said, my voice trembling, not daring to turn back. Behind me, Lucas said nothing, only silence, the heavy, dense silence signaling that the fragile boundary between us has cracked once again. I thought from now on, every silence and glance between us felt heavy with unspoken pain and misunderstanding, highlighting our shared isolation. No matter how accidental, it all contains an unfathomable power that I find hard to resist. I closed the door behind me and leaned against the cold wood. The darkness in the room seemed to thicken, wrapping around me with a nameless anxiety. I gasped for air, as if I had just escaped something far greater than myself. No one was small in this story anymore. Not me, not Lucas. I collapsed onto the bed, my eyes wide open in the dark. Everything I had ever believed in, marriage, duty, motherhood, was crumbling inside me, piece by piece. Our interactions had become emotionally difficult and complicated, filled with confusion. I shut my eyes, trying to push the feeling away. But memories of that afternoon on the beach, of the timid first touches, of Lucas's genuine concerns stayed with me, reminding me how deeply I'd missed emotional connection. All of it swarmed me, mercilessly. A soft knock sounded. I didn't need to open my eyes to know who it was. I lay still, pretending to sleep, hoping Lucas would leave. But the door creaked open, and I heard the sound of bare feet stepping into the room. The bed dipped slightly as he sat at the edge. Silence enveloped us, pushing my senses once again to their limits. Mom! Lucas' voice was hoarse as if he was fighting with himself. Turned away, panicking, pulling the blanket higher, a fragile shield between us. Lucas, you need to go back to your room, I whispered, my voice trembling and choked. Just a minute, he whispered, almost pleading. Just let me stay here. I shook my head, tears spilling helplessly. No, we can't. This is a mistake, Luke. Yet he touched me, didn't force anything. He just sat there, a living reminder of the emptiness I had tried so hard to bury all these years. Mom, do you know? Lucas said softly, his voice breaking. I've never seen anyone as sad as you. I clenched my fists under the blanket. Don't say more. Don't see the pain I didn't even want to admit to myself. You've spent your whole life for others, Lucas continued, almost talking to himself. But who has ever spent their life looking at you? I burst into tears, sobs breaking through the dark room. I hated myself for being so weak, hated that a part of me wanted to cling to that rare warmth. Lucas, you have to go, I sobbed, please. He stood up, slowly, as if each step weighed him down. Before leaving, Lucas paused at the door. I'm sorry, he said, for making you feel guilty just for being loved. The door closed behind him, and once again I was left alone in the darkness, facing the fiercest storm of all, the storm within myself. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, but I still couldn't summon the strength to get out of bed. I hadn't slept all night. Everything inside me was tangled like a ball of knotted thread that couldn't be unraveled. I heard the clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Lucas. He was making breakfast, as if nothing had happened. I sat up, burying my face in my trembling hands. How could we ever go back to the way things were? How could I look Lucas in the eye, look David in the eye, look Ella in the eye, When I had crossed a line there was no returning from. I forced myself to stand. Every step felt like I was dragging heavy stones. In the mirror, I saw a 42-year-old woman, but her eyes were heavy, as if they had endured a lifetime of waiting, sacrificing, and finally collapsing. I made my way to the kitchen, where the smell of baked goods and coffee filled the air. Lucas turned when he saw me and gave me a gentle, warm smile, so tender, I had to look away to hide the panic surging inside me. "Good morning, Mom," he said, as if last night had never happened. I gripped the hot coffee cup in my hands, clinging to it like it was something still intact. "Good morning," I replied, my voice so faint it was barely audible. We ate breakfast in silence. Every movement, every stolen glance felt like it was lined with thorns, cutting into me. Lucas was different. He was calm, gentle, as if he felt no fear or regret. That unsettled me even more. How could a boy so young remain so composed? After a mistake that I, an adult, couldn't stop torturing myself over. As I cleared the breakfast dishes, Lucas stood up and came closer. The nearness froze me in place. "Mom," he said, using a deep, warm tone I had never heard from him before, "I know you're scared." I tightened my grip on the plate in my hands. "No, Lucas, don't," I whispered, shaking my head. He didn't touch me. He just stood there, patient but unwavering. "I just want you to know," Lucas continued, his eyes piercing through every wall I had tried to build. "I won't force you. I won't do anything. You." I turned away, unable to bear that gaze. My heart felt crushed. All these years, I had longed for someone to truly see me, listen to me, touch me, not as a dutiful wife or a perfect mother, but as myself, Evelyn, a person struggling to find herself again. What the price of being seen? Was it a burden I could bear? "You better go outside and play," I said, my voice trembling, "so I can clean up." Lucas stayed silent for a moment. Then he nodded gently. "I understand," he said, and turned away. When his figure disappeared behind the door, I collapsed onto the cold table. Tears streamed down silently. I had lost the last bit of peace left inside me, and I knew from now on every day would never feel normal again. That afternoon, the house was engulfed in a heavy silence. David was still busy at the office. Ella was at a friend's house, leaving just Lucas and me, each occupying a separate corner, like strangers trapped in a story that had veered off course. I tried to busy myself, hoping that distraction would erase the persistent tension gnawing inside me. I wiped the tables, rearranged the books, even pulled weeds in the garden. But nothing could make me forget the way Lucas had looked at me that morning. That gaze? It wasn't just youthful longing. There was something deeper. Trust, understanding, and a loneliness that mirrored my own. By the time sunset fell, the house seemed coated in a thin dust of unspoken things. I was in the kitchen, fumbling with the dinner no one had asked for, when I heard slow footsteps approaching. "Lucas." I didn't turn around, but I knew he was standing right behind me, too close, too intense, like a flame I dared not touch but couldn't retreat from. I drew a deep breath. "Ella will be home soon," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Lucas said nothing. Instead, I felt his warm breath brush against the back of my neck, sending a shiver through me. "I know," he replied, his voice strangely deep and rough. I turned around, determined to put an end to this once and for all, but when I faced him, every prepared word evaporated. Lucas looked at me with nothing hidden. No fear, no hesitation, only raw, suffocating sincerity. "You don't have to pretend to be strong in front of me," he said slowly. "I see you. I've seen you for a long time." Took a step back. "Lucas, this this is wrong." "Then why don't you push me away?" he asked, not accusing, just painfully sincere. I froze. That question cut deep because I knew the answer. It wasn't that I lacked reason. It wasn't that I didn't know right from wrong. It was that I had gone so long without being truly seen, truly felt, truly loved for who I was. A silent tear escaped down my cheek. I covered my face as if hiding my eyes could hide the guilt swallowing me whole. But Lucas gently pulled my hands away. "Don't hide anymore," he whispered. In the small kitchen under the fading light of dusk, Lucas stood beside me quietly, his silent presence offering comfort, a tenderness that made me tremble. I wanted to push him away. I should have pushed him away, but I stood frozen, unable to voice the boundaries I knew were necessary. I stood there deeply moved, recognizing how isolated we both felt, like a drowning soul grasping at the only lifeline left. In that moment, everything I had ever believed in shattered. All that remained were two people, lonely, broken, standing there emotionally connected in mutual loneliness. We silently understood each other's sadness as if the world outside no longer had anything left to offer. I knew from this moment on, Lucas and I realized our relationship had become complicated in ways neither of us intended. The next morning, sunlight flooded through the kitchen window, illuminating the silent fragments within me. Lucas had gotten up early. He didn't say a word, just quietly made me a cup of coffee, placed it on the table, and left, as if afraid that any words might further crack the already fragile space between us. I sat there for a long time, watching the thin steam rise from the cup. Only one question echoed in my mind. What have I done? Our relationship had shifted, losing the simplicity it once had, no longer a family in any real sense. We had crossed a line that no one and nothing could ever mend. As I sat silently facing myself, the front door swung open. David was home. I'd been jolted upright like a criminal caught in the act. David walked in, his face tired, his shirt still dusted with traces of the office. "Hi, honey," he said, as usual, completely unaware, not sensing the suffocating heaviness filling this house. It's a I smiled, the weakest, most distorted smile of my life. "Hi." Lucas came down the stairs and our eyes met for just a fleeting moment. No words, no need for any. Everything that had happened the night before still hung in the air, heavy, raw, and painful. David looked at us, frowning slightly as if sensing something odd, but quickly brushed it off the way he always did. Never seeing, never asking. "What do you want for dinner tonight?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. A trivial question. A desperate attempt to cling to something called normal. David chuckled softly. "Whatever you like." I wanted to laugh. Whatever I like? If only he knew what I had done in search of feeling liking again. Would he still say it so easily? Lucas quietly went outside without having breakfast, without saying a word. I stood there between a husband who still believed everything was fine and the vast emptiness growing inside me. I had lost everything: family, honor, myself. I wanted to believe that time would heal, that somehow things could return to the way they were, but deep down, I knew it was impossible. Lucas and I had broken something sacred, and even if we never touched again, the crack would remain. Irreparable. Indelible. Every time I looked at David and Ella, I would remember. Every time Lucas passed me in the hallway, I would remember. Every night lying beside a husband who no longer truly touched my soul, I would remember. And in the depths of that pain, I realized sometimes the greatest betrayal isn't to others, it's to your own heart. I used to think that great wrong stemmed from impulsive decisions, from moments of losing control, but no. Sometimes the worst begins with silence, with tiny empty spaces no one bothers to fill, with the endless wait for a gaze that truly listens, a touch that truly comforts. I am not seeking forgiveness. I am not hoping for understanding. I only know that from the moment we silently turned away, when no one truly saw the other anymore, the tragedy had already quietly begun. There are mistakes that cannot be undone. We can only live with them in quiet regret for the rest of our lives. What do you think about this story? Have you ever felt yourself slowly fading away in your own life? If you were in that situation, would you choose to silently endure or bravely make a change before everything becomes too late? Please share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your honest feelings and stories, because maybe through those words, we'll each find a part of ourselves